Welcome again for more misconception about car mods I'm tired of hearing. Let's see what this is all about then.
Since y'all loved part 1 so much, which by the way, if you haven't checked it out, I'll link it here as well as at the end of the video. Definitely go watch it as well. Anyways, here's round 2 of 4 more misconceptions about car mods that I'm tired of hearing. The first myth is that people always say throttle body spacers add a lot of power for a very low price.
That's
and I'm bringing
stupid.
this up because I got a lot of comments that were like, bro, bladed, fine, I understand the fact that cold air intakes do make horsepower, but their price to performance ratio is terrible. Why spend $400 to get 7 horsepower?
Price to performance? Bro, you're into wrong things if you are price to performance with cars, bro. You shouldn't say that with cars. Like, the best price to performance are tires. Tires. Everything else is just, you spend thousands of bucks for just a smidge. Except for if you do big block or big turbo or whatever.
Horsepower when I can spend $100 and get 20 horsepower. Throttle body spacers are the best beginner mod.
That's stupid.
Trust me, bro.
That's
First
so
off,
stupid.
That's completely false. Intakes are a great mod no matter what. I'm going to die on that hill if I have to. Secondly, even if you don't plan on your car reaching boosted endgame status, it's still a good power mod to do for bolt-ons, and it's also just a good future-proofing mod because, again, let me remind you, it scales harder with each additional mod that you're going to add because every car enthusiast adds more mods. Whether that's cams, headers, intake manifolds, or catbacks, that 7 horsepower can suddenly become 15. When it comes to throttle body spacers, they're the most white-knighted keyboard warrior defended mod.
I have never heard of those
find
things.
About someone finally dyno running one of these on a stock car versus with it on, it made 1 horsepower. That's such a small gain that it falls under the principle of within the noise, meaning it could have just been temperature, humidity,
Like if it
or other
was
variables
bigger
that
or
caused that
smaller,
horsepower change.
or
For example, when my Z06 was dyno tuned, it did 3 runs.
Streamline?
Each run had a 1 or 2 horsepower
Then it would be
variance
sure.
up or down.
Throttle body
Even
good,
though
but
the car
spacers?
still had the exact
That's
same
stupid.
amount of mods, and this all took place during the same day. There was an hour difference between each of those runs, so the weather temperature is changing slowly as the day progresses. That actually does yield slight differences of 1 to 2 horsepower, so we can't even confirm that that 1 horsepower was made by the throttle body spacer. In truth, a throttle body spacer just increases throttle response. This can be a difference of 5 to 10%, so let's highball it and say 10%. So for someone who's really light on the pedal or super slow to depress their pedal all the way, this can make an immediately noticeable difference because they feel like they've gained 10% more
Okay,
power.
so
Again,
it's
all
response.
just placebo. You're just able to push
That's-
the pedal harder, faster theoretically. You're increasing your response time. Keep that in mind. That's
Okay.
only if you have horrible throttle management. Realistically speaking, you can just train yourself to have better throttle management. You do not need to spend $100 to buy a mod
Yeah,
that increases
still
your throttle
stupid.
response. You can just give yourself better throttle response through training, which is why I'm going to finally talk about the huge elephant in the room. I did talk about this in my 25 fake first real mod videos, but it was so brief that it's honestly just a crime because we have to talk about it here. I know what people are mixing these up about. Also costs the same exact amount of money, being about 100 bucks. It's a ported throttle body, not a throttle body spacer. This is peak consumerism right here. I almost can't even blame people because it's not their fault. It's companies' fault. Companies have found out the real name of the actual performance mod being a ported throttle body, and then they marketed a close sounding product with a similar name, aka throttle body spacer, and they gave it pretty colors. You've likely seen more advertisements about throttle body spacers than ported throttle bodies. You also are more likely to notice them because they're cute, pretty painted colors. However, the public or the people who buy these mods still associate the actual gains of the original power mod, but are actually now buying a similar sounding fake mod that was just marketed better to them. So car ads really got people good on this one. The lesson here is if you're gonna spend 100 bucks anyways, buy a ported throttle body, not a throttle body spacer. A ported throttle
Exactly what
body
I
is an
said.
actual proven by dyno mod.
Actual
It
throttle
actually
body, not
makes power,
spacers.
albeit it's a very minor difference at first. On its own, on a small displacement engine, the gain can be as low as 3 horsepower, but it's outside of the
Look, this guy knows what he's talking about. You can clearly see it. If you got more air coming in, it can make more power after a tune. After a tune. We gotta say after a tune. You're not gonna notice. The ECU has become so advanced, you have to tell it. It has a capacity to gain more air, so use that more air. Like it says here, if you upgrade it just a couple of millimeters, you can get more air into your engine. It's better, more air. With the right parts, of course, with the right everything, can make more power.
The 1 to 2 within the noise range that I always talk about, meaning that it is actually measurable. It can even make up to 5 horsepower on some mid-sized engines like V6s. But if you're talking about bigger engines like V8s and you're changing out your cams, pairing it with a cold air intake, or even doing intake manifolds, you can expect gains of 7 to 10 horsepower plus. If you're combining it with a ported blower setup, oh, it's going to make even more. Again, unlike cold air intakes, ported throttle bodies are a mod that scales based on other mods. On its own, 3 horsepower isn't much, but at least that $100 actually did something for you, unlike the other mod. Meanwhile, a throttle body spacer when paired with an intake, as I mentioned earlier, makes no difference. That means that when you pair it with any other future mod, it still makes no difference. It doesn't scale with other performance mods because it was never a real performance mod, whereas a ported throttle body will actually scale harder the more and more stuff you add with it. So to explain why porting works, here's my overly simplified explanation on it. TLDR, airflow, be it space, speed, or path, is the main point of porting. You might be wondering why cars don't already come with ported throttle bodies, and the real reason is the same reason why your car doesn't have the most efficient factory cold air intake. It's because of EPA guidelines and noise regulations, aka they don't want us to have our fun whoosh whoosh whine noises. So there's your answer for that. Sorry for that long tangent, but now that you know why ported throttle bodies are real mods and how the concept of porting works, that should help you in the future, alright? Do not fall for the biggest marketing scam of this recent decade. Speaking of spacers, that brings us to our next entry, wheel spacers. Lots of mechanic car YouTubers talk about how this is the new plague of the earth, and while there are definitely downsides to using them, a lot of trouble can be mitigated, or you can just accept/acknowledge them when you do decide to do them. You, the user, it's your car at the end of the day, you have the choice of what you want to do.
Spacers are not bad.
Who hopped onto the bandwagon of,
spacers are not bad, as long as you know what you're doing.
They have, good intentions, but at the same time, their best interests aren't necessarily your best interests, right? Let's briefly talk about the bad things that can happen and the good things you can do to mitigate some of the bad. First off, running spacers will mean that your wheel bearings will wear more frequently. However, that doesn't mean they blow up in 10,000 miles, especially if you're still getting hub-centric ones that are within reasonable size. For cars, around 25 millimeters. For trucks, around 75 millimeters, 1 or 3 inches in freedom units for the Americans watching. If you go larger than that, then you usually will have more notable issues that you will notice sooner. But even saying that, remember, this is still several tens of thousands of miles. Your wheel bearings usually get replaced every 85,000 to 100,000, so if having spacers makes yours wear 10 to 20% faster, you still got a good 60 or so thousand miles that you can have those spacers on, and to some people, they're fine with that. They're just like, okay, I'll just set my interval to be a bit earlier. That's what I mean by these aren't super panicky or worth freaking out over. But as long as you get properly made ones that are aluminum, high quality, hub-centric, and within reasonable size, you should be fine with these. I'm not here to ruin any of your fun. I get it. You want cool offset without spending all of that hard cash, or maybe you're just playing around with the idea of how much offset you need before you actually do buy a new set of wheels of different offset. Because at the end of the day, no amount of forum browsing, video watching, or speculation can actually help your brain visualize how fitment actually looks on your car, than to just, actually put it on your own car. Because instead of spending $2,400 worth of wheels only to figure out it had the wrong offset, you can just buy spacers instead. Spacers aren't some super secret scary boogeyman that's gonna rob your wheel bearings and blow out your tires and make your car's entire suspension disintegrate by tomorrow morning, like how most people are painting them as. Simply put, it's just a cheap solution, or an alternative for those who just want to solve fitment woes or just learn about fitment goals. Not everyone who runs spacers actually intends to be on them permanently. If you're only going to use them for a few hundred miles or a few thousand miles, you will literally never notice the wheel bearings wearing faster. If that's why you want to buy them, hell yeah, I absolutely encourage that. Don't let people bully you or pressure you into wasting thousands that could have just been solved or done in hundreds. Now, even if you do intend to permanently use spacers, the reason I'm still okay with that is if you just really like the design of your OEM wheels and you just want to flesh them out more, boom, couple hundred, call it a day. An OEM set of wheels on spacers is still way safer than a custom offset rep set of wheels. Tires don't matter, or winter tires are a myth, or any
so
variant
stupid.
of that. Now, this is a surprisingly huge misconception, not just with non-car people, but even with car enthusiasts.
Tires are the
reason is
most
because
important thing.
tires are a disposable wear and tear item, so psychologically, our brains don't like spending more on something that we don't get to use very long of. Our brains tend to take for granted how important something that is frequently used actually is. For example, we all eat food to live, but over time we begin to care less and less about what food we eat, and maybe even believe that it doesn't actually matter all that much, even though it actually matters more than anything else. So, back to the topic of cars, this logic actually applies with tires, and because they're constantly being used by our cars and constantly being changed for our cars, it's just a tire. And a lot of people always say, I already have all-wheel drive, therefore I don't need winter tires, because tires are just tires. Completely forgetting the fact that tires are literally the first thing that touches the ground for your car. No amount of horsepower matters if you have the wrong tires. No amount of downforce matters if you have tires that don't grip. No amount of girls you match with on Tinder matters if you can't even make it to their house during the lonely months of winter because you can't drive through the snow because you don't have winter tires. Let's just actually think about tires. They don't have any clout points associated with them, and that's what most younger car enthusiasts are motivated by. Tires kind of all look the same. The font, the lettering, all of that barely makes a change. You can up the sidewall, make it thicker, sure. Most people will not notice that. The point I'm making is that you can't really customize or color tires all that much, and if you try to paint them, it doesn't remain that color for long, and you're just gonna drive on super slick paint for a bit. I mean, think about it. Seriously, when's the last time your friend or any of your friends bragged to you about their new tires? And even if they did you listen? Exactly. Meanwhile, if they get a new carbon fiber hood, the entire car meet gathers around to sing Kumbaya. So because tires aren't visually impressive and because they're seen as a wear item, we really underestimate just how good they are for us and how much of a change they can actually make. Fat Mickey Thompsons are the reason that 2,000 horsepower drag cars still go straight as an arrow and not beaming into the audience. Nittos, Michelins, Pirellis, BF Goodrich, Yokohama, all of the above, any of the unmentioned. Tires aren't just tires, they're the tires. They're the single most important mod/maintenance item to ever exist for your car. But before we move on to the final entry, if you're enjoying my videos and are coming back anyways, then make sure to subscribe. I appreciate it greatly. It helps my channel out a ton. I'd love to have
He's
you
so
around.
good with
Okay,
it,
so
bro.
the foul entry is coilovers are pointless if you never want to adjust your ride height. This is a kind of dumb myth, but I can see
people
where it's
are
coming from. At
really
the same time,
stupid.
I'm gonna explain to you
I'm
why
gonna
it's
say
just
it's
not true.
probably
Unlike
only in
the other
America,
performance
but
mods I've
geez,
talked
so
on the series,
stupid.
coilovers don't have the clout of sick power gains to give the dopamine that entice most people into doing them. However, that doesn't change the fact that they're still very important, even if you never intend on adjusting them constantly. Firstly, even if you don't think you'll ever adjust them, ask anyone who's bought multiple cheap lowering springs about their regrets instead of just saving up to buy coilovers. Now, this is gonna kind of be the opposite logic of wheel spacers. With wheel spacers, I told you guys to spend less now so you don't mess up for later, but for coilovers, I actually want to tell people to spend more now and regret spending too little later. Most beginner enthusiasts tend to buy used cars.
Like if you are gonna spend like $1,000 now and wait and make more money and spend $2,000 to $3,000 later, you might as well just wait because, well, the cheap set is not gonna make you happy at all. I know that you can probably like lower your car, stand your car, do whatever. The more expensive thing will give you so much better everything. It's just so much less of a hassle. Plus, you don't need to buy it again. And usually they come with like rebuilds and stuff like that. So probably a whole lot better, yeah.
Cars, even with relatively healthy mileage like 50 to 60k, usually are still due for their first strut replacement. For example, a Mustang GT replaces its struts between 50 to 100,000 miles depending on driving conditions. Lowering springs, even if you do buy the right ones that give you the right drop, they still use your stock struts. In fact, some of them actually add more stress to your stock struts so they can actually reduce their lifespan. And again, if you're talking about a car that you bought used for 50 to 60,000 miles, I'll be honest with you, even though it's on the earlier end of the window, it's still in the strut maintenance window. It's actually better to just get coilovers instead, because here's my logic for that. You're going to replace the strut anyways. So you're either going to spend $500 on struts and the $200 in springs that will become useless once you do get coilovers later on, or you can just buy the $700 to $1,100 coilovers. Like for Mustang specifically, SR coilovers are like just barely
they are way cheaper than I thought.
I'm not sponsored by them, but they have insanely good reviews, and I've got a couple of friends who actually run them that I know Camaro in my local staying club, and they've had them for several years, almost 60k miles, and they held up just fine. Coilovers last about as long as struts do from a lifespan standpoint. Here's the thing though, they replace them. So by buying coilovers, you killed 2 birds with 1 stone. So even if you aren't constantly planning on adjusting your ride height, it's kind of not a bad idea to get them anyways. We car enthusiasts love to tick off maintenance check marks with upgrades. I mean, come on, don't lie to me. You've definitely done it, or you've had the thought about doing it. A lot of car enthusiasts always think this, where they're like, why would I buy stock part for X amount of money when I can spend just a little more to buy an upgraded version of that part that also fits the maintenance interval? Yeah, now you thinking like a real seasoned car enthusiast if you have those thoughts. And just like with the tires there, why replace the stock tires when you can get better tires even if they cost more? It's kind of like that with coilovers. So on a final note, coilovers also just have more compatibility with other aftermarket mods. So even if you do dial in them correctly the first time, you might still adjust them later on. You never know if you want to get aftermarket caster camber plates, get aftermarket sway bars, or just other additional accessories that just pair really well with coilovers, and you can really feel the full difference and performance gain because of coilovers. Again, kind of back to the whole mod scaling thing. Instead of a horsepower standpoint, now we're talking about a suspension standpoint. Even without the additional accessories, you get a surprising amount of adjustability with coilovers. Like, camber is really nice, and you don't have to worry about stressing your struts when you do it because you've got a strong replacement component that was better than your original factory strut. They aren't just for people who race and need to constantly adjust. Even for street driving, or even for just cosmetically showing off at meets, it's nice to get some extra low or some extra high. So anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. Remember to check out part 1 if you
Yep, super nice. If you are stupid enough to actually believe those misconceptions, those 8 misconceptions, you are so dumb. But you came to the right place to learn. And well, as you continue to learn, you'll continue to know, and you will continue to form your own opinions on stuff. Don't listen to the internet all that much, except for if you actually know, you know? Anyway, peace.